we have Mohan from our team, and he is like a senior product manager here at SingleStore. And he's basically the perfect speaker when it comes to getting started on SingleStore. So if there's anything that like want to know, if you have any questions that probably have not been resolved in the past, Mohan is the guy. And you can always ask anything that you have. No matter what the question is, you can utilize the Zoom Q&A button, which is present at the bottom of your console, and we will be taking all the questions through that. And just so that you all know, we will be having a dedicated Q&A session that is going to happen towards the end of the session. So stay tuned for that. I will be communicating every resources using the chat button. You will be seeing it as a pop-up message, and everyone can access it. Just an FYI, we have disabled the chat for all the participants, and you are currently in a listen-only mode. So if you have anything to say, use the Q&A button. If there's any feedback or any questions uh, or ideas for future webinars, like you can always reach out to me or Mohan on LinkedIn. Our DMs are always open. And if there's any other query, you can always reach out to us at team@singlestore.com. So yeah, I think Mohan, you're good to go?
Yep, I'm good to go.
Awesome. Awesome. Please take it away. Take care.
Great. Thanks, Yukti. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Mohan Mantina. I'm a product manager, SingleStore. And today, let me just keep moving on. So today, let's just start talking about what single store is. So I'll spend just few slides talking about the single store databases capabilities, how some of our largest customers are using single store for their business critical use cases. Then I'll switch over to a demo by showing you our portal and walk you through an overview of how to get started. This will be all the basics around creating a workspace, how to create a database, loading data into the database using notebooks. And also we can look into some observability capabilities, which is really critical for enterprise customers, as well as data developer experience features such as database branching. So as Yukti said during the presentation, at any time, if you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand, and Yukti help me look at the question, or bring up the question, and I'm happy to answer it as we go along, or just type it up in Q&A. So let's get started. So who are we, right? So SingleStore has been around for over a decade. I think it's 14 years now. And we have over 120 plus million ARR with 400 plus customers. All this to say that we are a very mature company with strong financials and a really good customer experience track record. And so SingleStore at its core is a real-time performance database that you can use for all your transactional and analytical use cases. So what that basically also means is that with SingleStore, you can start off small with just like say a couple of GB or tens of GBs and slowly scale all the way up to hundreds of terabytes or even petabytes. And we really shine at those high concurrency and low latency query execution workloads, which means if you can imagine having a stream of data that you're ingesting into the database, or using a pipelines with which they are extremely performant. So you can ingest hundreds of millions of rows within seconds. That data will be available for your application or dashboards in real time. And that's of high value for enterprise customers. And here are some really good customer names that are using SingleStore. These are, as you can see, your household names. Starting with Adobe, they are supporting over 3,600 customers with SingleStore, and with a database size of about 70 terabytes. That's, to be honest, it's on the medium size. But then we have Siemens, which perfect for our high concurrency workloads. As you can see, we are supporting over 100,000 concurrent users for that customer. And then along with that, we have some of our largest like household name brand banks that are also using SingleStore specifically for their transaction workloads. And this shows that we are great at supporting asset compliant transaction workloads as well as those analytical workloads I was talking about. So if I take a step back and just look at an enterprise architecture, right? How does an enterprises build their data architecture? They might start off small, as we talked about, where they might just have a single OLTP database or like a SQL database, like a Postgres. To support the application. But then as the data is growing and they want more performant, they might add a caching layer on top of it. Or if they want to start streaming in more data, say IoT use cases, or want to do more and more search, right? So they might start having Elastic for search, and you can see how they start slowly building up on their data layer, right? And as they have a lot of data and they want to do analytics, they might start building a data lake or a data warehouse. And finally, with AI becoming the forefront of most of enterprise customers' minds, vector databases are becoming extremely popular too. So they might hook on a vector database for a vector specific use case. And this is a great example because slowly the layers are growing, which means the data architecture complexity is also growing. And what that means is that now it's not just the fact that there's a lot more tools to manage and use. It could also be that the applications could be less responsive because data needs to move across multiple different layers here. And from the business perspective, costs, right? Like the more data you move across and duplicate, the more costs it'll be. And this is where SingleStore really shines. And it's a great example of how our current large customers are using is that from a developer perspective, you don't need to worry about so many tools. Being a transactional, high performant database, you could pretty much replace Postgres or any of your caching layers. And also for being a really strong database from an analytical point of view, you could also use it for some large analytical queries, which means from a developer experience point of view, you just need to focus on building your apps and then just worry about having a simple data architecture. But even from the business point of view, you're overall saving a lot from your total cost of ownership. So that's just like gives you a starting view. Um, so this slide again essentially kind of reiterates the point that I was trying to make previously, where SingleStore is a really performant database that can provide you sub millisecond queries, especially for your transactional workloads. So we work with a lot of different partners that can allow you to easily ingest data. So in this example, you can stream like from Kafka, right? All the IoT use cases or even Red Panda. We have single store flow that I'll spend a little bit more time down the line talking about that will allow you to ingest data from any of your SQL endpoints into single store by just few click of a button. So that streamline is extremely easy. And then I talked about pipelines. So pipelines are really good and high performant because you can now insert, I would say, like hundreds of millions of records in few seconds. Along with the ingesting part of it, we also play really well with Iceberg. So we have native connectors with Iceberg that lets you bring in data from Iceberg and also send data out from Iceberg into data lakes, in this case, like Snowflake and Databricks and Spark and so forth. And finally, I'll cover LLMs and AI a little bit more in the next couple of slides. But we play really well with an API, so you can bring in the LLM of your choice to build your agentic applications. We also have something called SingleStore Aura, which is our container service, which I'll talk more, which will make it extremely easy for you to build your applications really close to the data that you already have, which is in SingleStore. Again, under great slide to show that the expansiveness of our ecosystem and interoperability with the wider ecosystem. Again, a great example of how it makes it easy for developers and administrators to use SingleStore. All right, let's get a little bit more detail now, right? Like we talked about what SingleStore is and the key values and how our enterprise customers are using SingleStore. Let's spend some time talking about just architecture, what enables SingleStore to be so performant and easy to use, right? So SingleStore at its core is a scale out database, right? So, and the way that works is that you have this um, multi-layer architecture where you have leaf nodes where you store all the data, and as you grow, you can just keep adding more and more of these leaf nodes, and then you have aggregators on top of that. We also have this under concept, which I won't go too much detail, just to keep things simple, but it's called unlimited database. And the whole idea of this is, if you remember, I talked about how customers come to SingleStore as a small database, maybe tens of GBs of data, and can even grow all the way up to petabytes. And unlimited database allows that to be possible because as you store your data, we are not only storing that, persisting it on the leaf nodes, but then very immediately we will store it in the object storage S3 as an example for AWS, so that your data can grow cost effectively and also highly durable. As you know, object storage is 11.9 durable here. So all your data is stored in shards across multiple leaves. And when a query is written, either from an application or you physically write a query, it's an aggregator's job to fetch that query, understand, interpret that query, and then go down to the leaf nodes, fetch the data that is needed across multiple leaf nodes, aggregate it, and present it back to the application. So that's single store architecture at a nutshell. Workspaces are extremely important in this context because this gives us the ability to separate the compute and the storage aspect of the database, and that isolation is very important for enterprise customers because it not only allows you to scale the compute without really messing with the storage or vice versa, but also gives isolation for different types of workloads or different users. So a good example is think, and I'll demo this in the presentation shortly. But you create a workspace. Workspace is just basically compute and IOPS and memory. So you create that, and then you could attach a database to the workspace, use that workspace to do a lot of ingest and supporting the writes for your application. And if you have an ad hoc large analytical query that your analyst or data scientist needs to run, you can create another workspace, attach the same database as a read-only database to the workspace, and run that analytical query without ever impacting your application performance in this case, right? So in this way, you can continue to add more and more workspaces to kind of scale your use cases as needed. And the great thing is, if you don't need that anymore because it's a ad hoc use case, you could spin down or terminate the workspace to save costs. So workspaces are really strong concepts, and I'll also talk about database branching along with that during the demo. Again, this is the high availability aspect is critical because as we talked about, we have a lot of enterprise customers using SingleStore, right? And for enterprise customers, availability will be very important. And so SingleStore has three layers of availability. And what's more important is availability is there by default. Like you don't need to really pay extra from the basic variant, but obviously as you go up, there's various levels of availability that you get. And this one that I'm showing is at a node level. What that means is at the architecture, at the core, data, every insert, everything that you write to single store database is stored in two different nodes or two different leaf nodes, primary and secondary. That way, if a leaf node goes down, the master aggregator or one of the aggregators will automatically fail over without your application ever knowing that a node actually went down. So that's the first layer of high availability. We also have availability at a whole available AZ or availability zone level. And as you guys know, AZ is like a whole data center, the physical data center that's separated into two geographical locations. So if that whole building goes down, you still have availability across that, safety net across that, because the mass aggregator will quickly fail you over to a second AZ to make sure that your application is still up and running without any downtime or impact to your business users or end customers. And then finally, we also have that high availability in form of disaster recovery that spans across a whole region, right? So you have US East and US West, and if a whole US East or Northern Virginia region goes down, you can quickly fail over in minutes to the West to make sure that your applications and your end customers are able to access the database as soon as possible. Let's talk for a few minutes about the various deployment options that SingleStore offers. At a high level, you have Helios. Helios is our managed service. It's really easy, and this is where I'll do most of my demo today, because all you have to do is sign up, do few clicks, and you have your workspaces and databases are ready to go. And then a few more clicks, and you can connect to your app, and you're ready to go. So it's really easy to get started. You don't need to think about the infrastructure underneath it. All of the management is taken care of SingleStore. So Helios managed service is the best way to get started. And within Helios, we have again few more options to cater to the enterprise customers as they need, right? So uh, common the most common that all of our customers use is a managed service. And think of managed service as it's a every customer gets an isolated dedicated compute, but there will be multiple customers in a single VPC, in a single region or deployment model. Now, for customers such as banking or healthcare who wants their own like VPC, and when you think about that, think about like even the network is not shared amongst any other customers, and they want their own dedicated cell in a way. Then we also have that option in terms of dedicated, where there'll be just one customer under a single account, and they're not sharing any they're not sharing any networking between other customers. So that's dedicated. And then BYOC is bring your own cloud. So we want to also give a flavor, a managed flavor to customers who don't want to move data out of their VPC. So they still want to have like physical control of their data and their infrastructure. BYOC is a great solution. And so think of like highly compliant healthcare customers, right? So they because of their compliance needs, their data has to be within their own VPC. And in that case, BYOC is a great product for them, because the data stays where they want it, but we are able to easily manage and take away the rudimentary aspect of patching and other infrastructure management aspects. So they're getting best of both worlds with Helios BYOC deployments. And then finally, you got your self-managed, which is self-explanatory, where you have single store licenses and you deploy it in your own infrastructure on-prem and manage it yourself. All right, so let me skip few slides as we are running out of time, and I'll start the demo. Let me just talk just a bit about our single store or our AI capabilities, and then I'll switch to the demo, and then cover the rest of the topics while I'm demoing the portal. So at a nutshell, SingleStore Aura is think of it as like a container service that sits really next to your database. And the key value that this provides is that you could run notebooks on your data for your data science type use cases, or have Python user-defined functions, or even cloud functions like Lambda. All of them can run on this container service closer to your database or your data, so that your apps can be really performant. And if you want to build any agentic type use cases, this gives you the infrastructure needed to build those agentic use cases, right? Because what does an agentic use case need? You just need your large language model, a bunch of tools like Python notebooks, and the data which is right there. And the beauty of Aura is that it's a serverless general compute layer with GPUs. So you don't need to worry about the infrastructure. You just spin up an app like a Dash app, and then we take care of, we bring up the compute underneath it and scale up or down as needed. So, so that's an overview of SingleStore and all of its key capabilities and how we support our enterprise customers. Let me switch the screen to our SingleStore portal, so we can kind of start seeing it as a demo practically of how you can use it and get started. So to start a free tier, we have two types of free tiers, and I'm going to explain them in just a little bit more detail. But to start a free tier, the best way that I would like to go is just go to our SingleStore website, and then you can click on start a free tier here. I won't go, just because of the time, into the detailed ways of how to actually start the free trial. But it's just, you just click over here, put in your email password, you'll get an email, you just confirm the email, and you're good to go. Once that's done, it'll take you to the general portal, right? The two types of trials of free tiers that we have, one is the shared free tier. The beauty of this is that there's no restriction in terms of the length, so you can have it for however long that you want to get the best, like, preview of a SingleStore. The only limitation is the extent of it. So you can only have one database. You can have 10 tables, which is pretty decent. About a GB of data, actually a little bit more than a GB, because it's compressed storage. So that should give you a good flavor of how SingleStore works. And then the other second sort of free trial that you get as part of your you signing up, is your own way to create your own workspace, because the previous one is shared. This is your own workspace, and you get 600 credits that you could use to go test out all the features. And 600 credits is quite a bit, and I'll show you, like, you should get you at least like 3 months worth of a good usage. So those are the two ways that you can explore and test out SingleStore. So as I said, in the shared tier, when you sign up, it'll ask you a bunch of questions, and based on those questions and your preferences, it'll automatically create a workspace and a database for you. So what I'll do right now is I'm going to use my standard free tier, which is, you can see in the orgs, like, you can have your org will show up right over here, and then show you how to create a workspace this way. Creating a workspace is extremely easy. You just go to create new and go to deployments. Sorry, I meant to say creating a workspace group. And the reason that's important is because we have something called a workspace group, and within that workspace group, you can have multiple workspaces. As I previously mentioned, workspaces are like just like a computer. So it's your vCPUs, memory, and so forth. So all the workspaces and databases go into a single workspace group. That way it can be very isolated for your workload needs. So if you have a business that has multiple different organizations, every organization can get its own workspace group. And the way you do it is go to deployment, and then here you go. You go ahead and create a workspace group. You can pick a different cloud provider that you would like, the region. There's a lot of pretty much just over 13 different regions. Um, and you go ahead and hit next, and that creates a workspace group. Since I already created a workspace group, what I'll do is I'll actually walk you through step by step on how to create a workspace, how to create a database and load data. So to create a workspace, I just go pretty straightforward, right? Create a workspace there, name the workspace that you want. Um, Here is where you can select the size of the workspaces. S00 is a good starter workspace, and this is the reason why I said that 600 credits is actually a long will get you a good amount of use out of it, because an S00 only burns about 0.25 credits per hour. So that's almost 3 months worth of credits. So if I click on edit, here you can see various different workspace sizes that you can use depending, and you can scale this depending on the use case and compute needs that you have. And it tells you, like, if you pick an S2, that's 16 vCPUs, 128 gigs of RAM, and its burn rate. And it goes all the way to S384. Some of these are grayed out because this is a free tier, but once you subscribe for it, you have access to all of this. So if you go to the if you max it out S384, you get 3000 plus vCPUs and 24 terabytes of RAM. That's a big workspace. All right. So so you select the size of the workspace that you want. And here are some of the additional settings that are there. Um, and that's it. You just pick the settings, hit create workspace, and it will start creating a new workspace. This might take a few minutes because it's actually provisioning the hardware in the back end. But since we already have some workspaces, let's just go and start creating a new database. Right? And again, creating a new database is pretty straightforward. There's multiple ways you could do it from the UI by naming a database over here and hit create, or you could do it via SQL, or through notebooks. So let's go try explore it through notebooks. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the data sources so that I can spend a little bit of time explaining about various ways that you can ingest your data. As I showed in the slide, that we have many ways for you to pull in and ingest data into SingleStore. Most common ways is to use SingleStore Flow that attaches to any JDBC or DBC drivers, basically any SQL-based databases. And with few UI clicks, you are able to go ahead and let me just click and show you, right? I don't have the connection settings, but as you can see, you just specify which workspace you want to bring in the data to and which database, put in your connection, and then you will kind of add some more variables in the next step, and that's it. And SingleStore Flow will take care of all of the rest of the setup and start ingesting data for you. Today, just to make things simple, we also have created a bunch of pre-done notebooks to allow you to pull in data, right? So let's use one of that as an example. So I'm going to use a CSV file that we already have in an S3 bucket to start ingesting. So when I click on it, and this is the best way to start if get started, because a bunch of work is already done for you, and this will just gets you like warmed up into like, here's how I can do it. So in this example, we have a CSV file in an S3 bucket, and I can also show you how to start creating a pipeline so that you can ingest all of this CSV file data into SingleStore. And some of the code is already written over here, so you can use that as a starting point to expand on it. So in this case, as you can see, this one is just basically checking if it's in a free tier or not, and then it goes ahead and creates a sales analysis database. While the database is getting created, which is just take less than a couple of seconds, now you can pull together how to create a table, right? So this is a basic SQL, right? These are different fields in that database. Let me just hit run. And here you are just, let me see what this is. Oh, okay. I need to select the database. So what this is a great example, right? What happened was that once you create a database, you need to specify which database you want to create this table. So you just go up over here, you can select the workspace on which you want to create a database. You already have the database. So in this case, we're picking sales analysis. And then once you have that, you're saying, okay, on this workspace, on this database, I want to go ahead and create the table. So this is perfect example, I guess, to to make sure that you specify the database in which you want to create a table. So the table has been created. Now you can go ahead and ingest the data. And here to ingest the data, what we are doing is we're creating a pipeline. We're specifying the S3 bucket location where the CSV file is. You put in some credentials of your S3 bucket over here, and then you're just saying start pipeline. It's as simple as that. And what this will do is it'll create a pipeline, it'll start ingesting data, which is from the S3 bucket uh, into the single store and puts it in this table. And as I said, pipelines are really fast. So just in matter of maybe 1 or 2 seconds, it already kickstarted. So let's see. Here you go. So it already loaded about 6 million rows. That's not bad at all. All right. So what did we do so far? We used this notebook to easily get started and create a database, create a table in the database, create a pipeline, and started ingesting the data from a CSV file, which was in an S3 bucket. And we can validate all of that by going back to our overview page. Here is the sales analysis database that we created. So if I go to the databases tab, you get to see all the databases here that you have created previously. Right now, we just recently created a sales analysis. When I click on it, you can see the table that I created. And then when I click on it, you can see all the columns in that table. And if you want to quickly validate it, you can also go ahead and look at the data over here. Now, as you can see, this was super easy to get started, right? Like, I mean, in a matter of like few minutes, I was able to start a workspace. By the way, here's the workspace I got started. The new workspace, we're able to create a database, we're able to ingest the data using notebooks, and we're ready to go run some queries. And if you want to run some queries, we can do it a few more ways. We can go back to the query editor. We can go back to our notebook that we were using, which is this one. I have some pre-written queries, but we can write new queries depending on the use case at any time, and make sure that I'm running it on the right database, and I can start running and executing the queries. So it's that easy to get started. Why don't we spend a few more minutes on one really cool developer experience feature that we have, and that's database branching. A database branch, and let me just get back to my slides just so that I can visually show you that. A database branch, think of it as, if you're familiar with GitHub, how you could fork your GitHub code into a new branch so that now you have two identical code bases that you can work on, make changes, play with it without ever impacting your parent or your production code base, right? So that's exactly what a database branching is. Let's assume that you have a production database. Within just a minute or less than that, depending on the size of your database, you could take a branch of that production database. When you do it, this new database, it acts as a completely independent database where you could now um, add data, delete data, update the data records to it without ever impacting the production database. And another beauty of the branch is that you're not duplicating your data, so you're not incurring additional costs. So as a developer, why is this so advantageous to me? This is because now if I want to go make changes to my app or test out some new functionality, I don't have to spend a ton of time creating a staging environment, putting in some mock data, connecting that app and doing all of that testing. What I could do is I could instantaneously create a branch. And actually, why don't I just go ahead and show that to you while I talk? So we just created this sales analysis database, right? Let me go there, say create a branch, name the branch. And that'll take maybe a minute or so to create the branch. And while that's happening, let me just get back over here and just talk through it for a second. So the critical use case is I can now instantaneously create a branch without having to worry about all the effort needed to create a staging environment and use that branch, which has real production data, to do all my testing, like just like change the tables, drop some columns, or even like add new functionality to my application. And then once I'm happy with the changes in the performance, I can go ahead to either drop this database branch or maybe even promote that to be the new production. As an administrator, this is also extremely helpful because now I can do point-in-time recoveries. For example, if I ran a bad query or dropped a table by mistake, I could now basically go back in time before I ran the query that actually made that detrimental change, like dropping a table, and then easily recover my data without ever impacting the application. So this one has various really helpful use cases. So in this case, as I was talking, I was able to easily create a branch called sales analysis. And again, this branch is, I can go back to the database and I can, okay, so yeah, I I think what must have happened is, as you can see, this is another way that you can configure your workspaces so that you could save on costs if needed. But in this case, it didn't really work out in our favor. But basically, I have a timer of about 60 minutes to suspend when it is not in use. So in this case, because I was just talking for about this a period of time, um, the workspaces were automatically suspended, which is just a way to save some costs. All right. So we now also covered how to not only create a database, but also how to create a database branch. So let's just spend a few more minutes just talking about the left nav, and I can start wrapping up the demo. So along with the deployments tab, we talked about data sources. This is where you get to ingest your data into SingleStore. We talked about the query editor, right? This is where we can create new notebooks and write the SQL that you need to query your database. We also have the container apps. This is a single store aura that I was talking about. One of the really cool features that a lot of our customers use is jobs, where an example is you can create a notebook like running a specific analytical query on a nightly basis, and then just create a job that runs that query recurringly every night. And so you can schedule a job. Um, Monitoring. So observability is very key for single store or for all our enterprise customers, and we have been leaning in heavily to build a lot of really cool observability features for our enterprise customers. And some of the key things I'll touch is active queries, as it says, it lists all the active queries that you have over here. Visual Explain is really cool because what it does is it gives you a view of how your query is running and where it's taking most of your time. Um, I have a screenshot that I captured just to give you a view, give you an example of how it will look. So let me just quickly show that screenshot. So a visual explain looks something like this, where it'll give you in a graphical way clearly how long your query has run. In this example, this query ran for about 277 milliseconds, which is not too bad. And it tells you where it spent most of its time. And what you could do with this is that now you can understand the query and then maybe change the sort key, for example, or modify the query in a way where it can become more performant. Query history is also another great feature that is really helpful because it shows you all the queries that it ran, and you can see which one failed, which one was successful, how long it ran, and then make some changes to the query going forward. Again, another way to observe and improve the quality of your queries. Active workloads are also cool because you can actually run a workload, start beginning profiling, and then actually in the live see how the query is running so you can debug it. Historical monitoring, again, more and more tools that we want to give you to be on top of your workload performance. So if I click on this, it opens up a Grafana dashboard and gives you a very detailed metrics about your workload, right? I can go into resource usage. I can look at your CPU and performance, disk usage and everything. And based on that, you can also decide, hey, I'm running really warm. Maybe I'll increase a scale up a bit, or I'm not using that much. And so now I'll scale down. So it gives you a way to kind of monitor and manage your workload requirements. Active history is great as well because it kind of really tracks who is doing what in your organization. So you can see who created a workspace, who created a database, who dropped the database, all of those things. So that is easy to audit after the fact. And then we also have alerts, which allows you to create alerts on workspaces and subscribe to like a mailing list so you can get alerts on when the workspace is running hot or based on how you configured your alerts. So that's the key things in the left now. Great. So um, let me get back to the presentation and then see if, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Just to summarize, we covered what SingleStore is, why our enterprise customers are using SingleStore, which is primarily for all things transactional analytical use cases and the power of query performance. We also went through all of the different things within our single store portal to get a sense of how do you create the database, how to ingest data into it, and how do you get started with queries. And as you can see, you could do all of that in just a couple of minutes. So it's very easy to get started. Um, yeah, I am open for questions. Please feel free to ask any questions that you have. But more importantly, I would love for you to sign up and go ahead and then play with the product. I think you will enjoy it, and I'm really excited to get some feedback as well.
Hi. We actually have a lot of questions, Mohan, for you. Are you able to access the Q&A console?
Uh, Actually, not really. Let me see if I can stop
I
my.
can read it out for you then.
Yeah, could you just like ask the
Yeah,
question and then I can, yeah.
yeah, I would read it out for you. So, our first question is from Jay Devan, and they say the leaf storage is local disks? Question mark. Are you able to understand the question?
Yeah, I think what they're referring to, if I'm not mistaken, is around that leaf nodes conversation where
Yes.
the way the single store architecture works is that you have a bunch of storage on the leaf nodes, and you can technically have up to multiple terabytes of storage on the leaf nodes. But as you're scaling up and up, obviously the larger the leaf nodes, the more expensive it'll get, and that's where you would want to use your unlimited database or bottomless storage for these needs. Uh,
Right.
I think the key you want to take out of this is that signals are scalable, right? So depending on how much storage you need, you could obviously add more leaf nodes or scale up, which is add more storage or cache storage to the leaf nodes. And let me show you something that's really cool while doing that. So what I could do is I can literally go and edit my workspace if I want to scale. And you see the scale factor right here. This you can change that to, I guess this is because the trial version I'm not seeing it, but you could just change the scale factor here as part of your edit workspace to like 2x or 4x, which gives you the ability to double the amount of cache space you have on the local disks. But ultimately, you want to take advantage of unlimited database as well. Hopefully, I answered the question there.
All right, sounds good. So the next question is from Prushikesh Leah. They are saying that there is a latency when we resume a workspace. How can one leverage the concept of workspaces such that application smartly routes the query to heavy compute workspace? I don't want to have the heavy workspace up and running all the time. So question is about how your customers deal with this problem.
I get it. Okay, so our workspaces are not quote unquote serverless in the sense that like how our Aura container service or Lambdas work, where depending on at the time of invoking is where infrastructure gets kicked up and ready to go, right? It's because we are not truly serverless. And again, most enterprise workloads cannot be truly serverless because there will always be a small lag when you scale up. So and to answer your question, what our customers are doing is they do have a base size workspace that is always supporting the application. And then they use our scaling or auto scaling, in this case that my screen shows, to scale up your workspace at a reasonable level to support those spikes. So I don't have a clear answer to say that, hey, if you don't want to use any of the workspace before your workload kickstarts, at this point, because we're not completely serverless, that's not possible. But you can have a hybrid option over here where have a base workspace that's continuing to support your workload. And then as the spike happens, use auto scale or just scaling factor to be able to support that spike.
All right, sounds good. So we have another question from Albert Lau. They say that does BYOC Helios support AWS GOV Cloud?
Oh, that's a good question. Unfortunately, today it does not support GovCloud for FedRAMP certification. We are working, and the main reason is because SingleStore is not FedRAMP certified yet. Um, but we are obviously continuing to work on that to support our GovCloud customers as well.
All right. So one question from Jing Zheng. They are saying, how is injection failure handled on a pipeline?
So I think we got to dig into that a little bit more. But at a high level, pipelines do have multiple retries. So if there's a failure on a pipeline, it's got the basic difference is for it to just retry. Um, I don't know all the nuances. So if you can shoot me an email or reach out to me or Yukti with more details on that question, and if you actually had like come across this incident where something failed, then I will certainly follow up on that to get you a more accurate answer.
All right, sounds good. So there's another question from Jaydevan. They say that single store supports use cases that does long running queries, that basically that do long running queries.
Is that a, sorry, I didn't
Yeah,
follow.
I
Is
can
that a question?
reiterate the question. I can reiterate the question. Just
Yeah.
give me a sec. Basically, I think what they're trying to ask is that does single store support those use cases that have long running queries, like as a part of the use case?
Yes, yes. I mean, we have sometimes customers talking about how they have queries running for like we got to define what long here is, but definitely maybe like upwards of 10 plus minutes or even more. Um, so the short answer is yes, yes. Now, if they're running for too long and you're seeing some congestion or high resource usage, you want to maybe start looking into why specifically is that query running for too long, and that's where this monitoring is extremely valuable because you could look at the query history or even your visual explain plans to understand the dynamics of the query to see if there's any optimization that can be done. And we are coming up with newer features day by day, like 9.0 um, has a really cool feature called it's basically automatically looks at how your query is running and then improves the plans every time you run your query so that the becomes faster and faster by using more accurate data in our query plans. So the short answer is yes, it'll support, but you will also want to kind of understand why it's running for that long.
All right, sounds good. So, there's a question from Azhar Mohammed. They say, does this workspace view, is this workspace view available with bare metal deployment as well?
Uh, Unfortunately, no, right? Like that's so what differentiates Helios with our on-prem option is that Helios gives you that workspace which is compute and storage isolation. So because of that ability that we can provide with our managed service, the whole compute and storage isolation, we can only offer that this workspace concept for our Helios customers and not on-prem. But I would love to talk to to you and your use case a little bit more to understand if one of the different deployment options like BYOC might work for you because BYOC is a great like a what do you call hybrid deployment option where workspace sorry where you do get workspaces but you can manage but your data is still sitting in your own VPC.
All right, sounds good. So we can move on to the next question. We have two questions from Jing Seng. They are saying, what's the latency difference? What's the latency between different AZ and AG? And the second question is, do you want to take this question first, or like, do you want me to read out the
Yeah,
second
let
one?
me take the first question.
First,
So
okay.
we are looking at query latencies between when all your workloads are in a single availability zone versus two availability zones. If I understood that question correctly, the late to be quite honest, the latency difference between because if I take AWS as an example, there's the networking between two AZs are so standardized that the latency difference is very minuscule. Maybe it could be like if one is 10 milliseconds across availability zones could be like less than 20 milliseconds. But we have not had a customer so far complaining about the latency being too high between availability zones, and the value outweigh the opportunity cost. What it means is that the high availability ability that two availability zones give you, just because it's separation across two data centers, that is for especially our transactional customers like banking customers is more valuable than the really tiny latency hit it might have. So for all practical purpose, you could ignore the latency difference.
So the follow-up question from the same user is, if branching is not creating a dupe of the original data set, how is it segregating the change versus the original data set?
Oh, I'd love to take that question. I'm actually the PM for branching, so we spend a lot of time leaning into building a really solid solution around it. There's a really long answer, and there's like a 4 minutes left, so I'll try to give you a TLDR, but happy to follow up with you if you have follow-up questions on it. Think the way we do branching is basically we use object storage where it's all immutable data, right? And immutable data basically means that you're always adding to it, you're never deleting or removing it. So in this example, if you add record 1, 2, 3, and 4, all we are doing in this case is putting pointers, right? So what does that mean? So if you look at this image, you got record 1 and 2. When you create a branch, those records 1 and 2 will show up in in this branch with just a pointer. And you add to these records, say 4, 5, and 6, or even delete. And delete is just another add with a flag. There'll be 7, 8, and 9. Those new records will be pointing only to the test database and not to the production database. And now all we do is we count these pointers and see which database it's attributed to, and that's how we are able to make sure that any changes you're making in this branch, which is in this case test database, does not impact or show up in the production and vice versa. And because of those pointers, you're never duplicating the data. So in this example, these 3 records that you created, even though it shows up in the test branch, you're not getting charged twice for it because it's all in the object storage as a single copy.
You answered that very well in the short time. So the next question is from Rushikesh Leah. They say that, is it something on the roadmap to introduce serverless workspace down the line?
I So the answer is going to be always yes, because if we have enough customer demand for that, we will always invest in it. But right now, I think our focus is around scaling and auto scaling. And the reason is because all the customers that we've been talking about at the enterprise scale, um, they they the serverless means less unpredictability, right? So not just unpredictability in performance, but also unpredictability in cost. They just can't budget for cost because serverless basically means it just grows and grows and grows or it reduces based on your workloads. So from what I've seen by talking to enterprise customers is they're more tuned towards having a base workspace and then scaling it up or down as needed. And that's why we've been focusing a lot on that. But if we have enough serverless use cases that customers are really wanting, we'll certainly invest in that. So at this point, we don't have it in the roadmap, but it's never a never answer.
All right, so we're almost out of time. So I have one question from Ramakrishna Kancheria. They're asking how to migrate from RDMS DBs to single store DB on-prem.
So we actually support single store flow even on-prem. So reach out to us. I would love to work with you to help you migrate that data, because single store flow is the best and easiest way to migrate your data between your RDMS database to an on-prem single store.
Seems like we have time for one more question.
Yeah, of
There's
course.
a question from Nivedita Velagati. They are saying, how can you replicate the same database between two workspace groups to provide disaster recovery?
Yeah, so I love it. So as I talked about how you can do workspace the DR across regions, we are using the same concept to allow you to replicate data across two workspace groups. This feature is going to be coming out soon. It's not out yet, but there's 2 options for you. And this is really cool. And option 1 is you could use the workspace as read replica. So you can have, say, a workspace one in one workspace group that's supporting all your queries, and attach the same workspace to a second workspace group in a different place to support only specific unique workloads. In this case, you're not really duplicating the data, so that's great for you. But and you're using that as a way to expand your use case, right? So in this example, you're not duplicating, you're just attaching it. The second use case, the true DR use case that you asked about, that we are working towards that, where we'll now allow you to even duplicate the data. So if something happens, you just fail over to this new workspace that is sitting in a different workspace group. It uses the same technology, or will use the same technology as the smart DR that we have. Which today supports across the region, but it will soon support across the workspace group too. In fact, you don't even need to think about it that way. You'll just have two workspaces always ready for you to fail over when needed. So yeah,
All
I
right.
love the question.
Sounds good. So thanks for the amazing questions. You know what? We have one last question from Ramaya Gupta. If you can
Yeah, I
answer
can
that.
stay. Yeah.
Like it's called what she's asking is that how is it different from Apache Doris?
What? How is what? Single so different from Apache
Yeah, it's
Doris?
yeah.
Unfortunately, it's embarrassing, but I don't know much about Apache Doris to comment on that. Um, I think this is a great thing. If you don't mind sending that question as a post or via forum, I'll do a little bit more digging and I'll get back to you on it. I'm so
Yeah, we can
sorry.
always follow up. No worries. So yeah, I think we are up 2 minutes, and thanks everyone for joining. We are having amazing sessions. Please keep an eye out on our landing page, which has the webinars. Like you go into events, resources, and webinars, so you can find the future webinars over there. Keep an eye out for an email from me, and that will have the recording for anyone that joined late, and it will have important resources. Mohan, if you want to share anything with the audience, send it to me. And yeah, I'll communicate it with everyone. See you all in the next webinar. Thanks, Mohan, for doing this with us. And thanks, everyone, for joining. Have a great rest of the day.